All right, so we are the European Central Bank. I'm Jocelyn.
One. And I'm Eric.
All right. So we want to start out by showing the significance of the euro and just how big it is in the world. There's currently 340 million Europeans that share the euro, and there was 227.4 billion banknotes, equaling up to 1.5 trillion in euros in circulation in August 2021. And 73% of all payments in the euro area were done in cash as of 2019. However, 40% of citizens have said that has decreased since the pandemic has started.
All right, so central banks are a fundamental part of every country and formal monetary union, and they are highly influential as they manage currency and monetary policy. For this reason, the European Central Bank is one of the most influential banks in the world. The European Central Bank's predecessor was the EMI, also known as the European Monetary Institute. The European Central Bank replaced the European Monetary Institute on June 1st, 1998, and began exercising its full authority January 1st, 1999, when the euro was introduced to the euro system. The European Central Bank is the official monetary authority of the euro system, which includes the 19 countries in the euro system on the right-hand side in the blue, and the 8 countries on the left in the white box, which are central banks that are part of the member states of the EU that do not use the euro. In total, there are 27 central banks that are under the European system of central banks. The European Central Bank is considered to be one of the most independent central banks in the world because of the 2012 international treaty. This treaty required that all changes be unanimous among all member states. So in 1992, the Maastricht Treaty established the European system of central banks. When the European Central Bank was created, it was in hopes of creating one domestic market for Europe. The creation of the euro helped further create one domestic market. The primary goals of the European Central Bank is to implement policy that maintains price stability and controls inflation. The ECB's goal is to keep inflation below 2% over the medium term. The primary way that they keep inflation below 2% over the medium term is by setting key interest rates. The ECB has the sole authority to authorize the issuance of currency, manages foreign currency reserves, overlooks financial markets and institutions, and it manages the payment and banking systems and monitors price trends and price stability.
So think about it, having to start a whole new currency for a lot of different countries was a very big deal. And the bank for sure needed to learn from their mistakes in the beginning. So because they were established in 1998, by 2001, they already wanted to reorganize the structure that they have already created. One of the more important restructures that they were able to do was to give a little bit more individual responsibility to the executive board. And so within the next slide, I talk a little bit more about the organization of what that governing board looks like. There's 2 organizations. If you can go back one, please, to the next slide. There's 2 organizations, the governing council and the executive board. The executive board is made up of 6 members who help, like any other company that we heard of, that we know of, that help run that company, but also works diligently and side to side with the governing council, which is the other 19 euro area countries that we have talked about before. The governing council really helps run the ECB smoothly, as these are the countries that the euro is being produced for. So they have to be able to ensure that they're creating policies and creating the documentations to make sure that these actions are actually being taken into account. And also, all of these nations have different opinions. They have different economic standings and a lot of different environments. So they want to make sure that their own voice is being heard when the ECB as a whole is taking action towards whether that be monetary policy or any other policy that they're looking to implement. And so they're responsible for monetary policies. They meet twice a month in Germany. And they are also when they're meeting, the president and the VP of the executive council, which we'll talk about in a bit, are in charge of presenting all findings. The Executive Council, I think how I see it is a little bit more of the business side of the ECB and making sure that everything is running smoothly on a day-to-day is a very important part of this organization. As you can see here, we have some of the members here, the president, including Christine Larga D. And this is only a group of 6 people. And so this is one of the main things, as I talked about before, when we were reorganizing this structure in the beginning in 2001, they wanted to make sure that these individuals were getting put into places where they're actually providing value for the ECB, which is very important to do. They do have an 8-year term limit, and they have no re-election, which helps a little bit more of the power distribution as we move forward with the ECB as a whole, as we want to make sure that there isn't a lot of influential people within the space that are going to keep power for so long. And again, the governing body governs the ECB as well with the Executive Council. So both of them are very, very important parties within the ECB and help run the whole Euro system currency, the Euro, a lot easier and efficiently.
All right, so I'm going to talk about the impact of the ECB. The impact of the ECB can be most related to the success of the euro as a currency. The European Central Bank created it in order to manage it. So today, 23 years after the euro and the European Central Bank's inception, the European Central Bank has helped make the euro the second most used global currency. The euro and the European Central Bank have made it easier, less costly, and safer for businesses to buy and sell within the euro area. The positive effect of the European Central Bank and the euro are felt across the European Union, and more than 3 out of 4 citizens believe that the single currency is good for the European Union. The Great Recession was the largest recession of our lifetimes, and it emerged as a result of the housing crisis in the United States, but it also affected the Eurozone. The European Central Bank's response to the recession was different from the Federal Reserve's response, as were the region's recoveries. The European Central Bank took longer to respond to the Great Recession, which may have added to the European Union's slower recovery. As shown in this figure, the European Central Bank didn't lower their policy rates to near zero until 2014. This slow reaction and the lack of more dramatic measures has eventually it resulted in a prolonged recession and very low inflation. And then, so now we're going to talk about the financials of the ECB. So as you know, the primary goal of the ECB is to maintain price stability. It's not to create profit. It has had a profit ever since its inception. The profit comes from interest income on banknotes, foreign currency reserves, and the purchases of investments and bonds. They use their profits to continue operations, pay for operating costs, to save money in order to cover future losses if they do occur. And they also distribute profits to the main shareholders, which are the national banks of all the countries, all that are within the EU. And so in 2019 and 2020, they had 1.6 billion euros and 2.4 billion euros in profit. That profit was distributed to the national banks, central banks within the Euro system and Eurozone as a whole. And in 2020, 1.4 billion euros net interest income on securities held for monetary policy purposes, as well as 112 billion euros, which was the amount that the bank's balance sheet grew due to the pandemic.
Right. So monetary policy. In definition, monetary policy is the control of the quantity of money available in an economy and the channels by which new money is supplied. So the ECB controls the monetary policy for the euro area, and it started its responsibility in 1999 when the euro was introduced, and in 2002 when the banknotes and physical coins were introduced into the economy. And the importance of monetary policy is that it allows for sustainable growth, a steady supply of money available to the banks, which include consumers and businesses, and probably the most important way that they control the money is through the interest rates. The ECB sets the loan interest rate, which will either encourage more spending or less spending. And later we'll talk on how the coronavirus, how they utilized setting these interest rates to help spending during that time. The ECB also has other tools to control money, which is not limited to, but includes changing the bank reserve requirements and lending cash to banks. The most important takeaway from monetary policy is how much money is in the economy at a given time and how it's supplied. And so it's very important undertaking, and it's a huge way in how the ECB plays a critical role in the success of the euro. So the ECB has a strategy for their monetary policy, which includes two different aspects. The first is a quantitative definition of price stability, which they set at 2% at a medium-term orientation. The HICP is a harmonized index of consumer prices, which reflects the inflation of the euro. And their pledge to the 2% is significant because it shows that they are behind the consumer and don't want the inflation to significantly impact the community with either continual high or low inflation rates. And the second is a two-pillar approach of the analysis of the risk to price stability. And those two policies are monetary analysis and economic analysis. And the economic analysis really focuses on the short and medium-term trends that are happening in the economy at a given time, while the monetary analysis is more of a long-term lens. And the goal is to really get a comprehensive vision for the future while acknowledging the short-term interest rates. So did the ECB deliver on this 2% goal since their creation in 1999? And the answer is yes. Over the 19-year period, they had an average inflation rate of 1.7%. There was some fluctuation, as you can see in the chart on the right. 4% was the highest and 0% was the lowest. But the key significance to this is that the ECB has proven that they can deliver on having control of the stability of the euro. And again, why 2%? It really backs the consumer, and they don't want continual high or low rates to really affect the citizens and their spending abilities. And the 2% still leaves room for adjustments between different euro regions. All right, so diversity inclusion programs, they have a lot of action to increase their programs within their organization. Their actions include staff training, running surveys, working with ECB ethnic and cultural groups, and using inclusive languages. And they also have multiple programs as listed here. In our opinion, this is a good first step. However, there isn't a lot of quantitative action taken in this aspect of diversity inclusion. However, they have taken a lot of action in regards to their gender diversity in their bank. So in 2013, the European Central Bank's Executive Board announced their new gender targets. So their goal was to have by 2019-20 to have 35% of middle management positions, which include head of division, deputy head of division, head of section, senior advisors, and advisors. 35% of those be women in middle management, and 28% of those be women in senior management positions. And the actual numbers of those in 2013 was that only 14% of women held these senior positions and 15% of women held these middle management positions. So in 2019, when they looked back on it, they did not meet their middle management goal. They actually were at 30%. However, they did exceed their senior management position goal of reaching 30% of women holding senior management positions. So after they realized that they did not meet one of the goals, they released a statement saying that they have released a new goal to have at least one woman in each of the business areas, senior management teams, and that at least 1/3 of the wider management teams in each business area should be held by females. And in 2021, they were awarded the MOVE level of the economic dividends for gender equality certification in February. So they are moving in the right direction. So COVID-19, it was a huge event that hit in March 2020 that affected all aspects of society and businesses, both large and small. And this did include the European Central Bank. So the European Central Bank took 6 measures. The first being helping the economy absorb the shock of the current crisis. This was probably the most significant, was with their pandemic emergency purchase program. And in totals, in 3 different parts, they had 1.850 billion total in euros that aimed to keep the costs of borrowing low and increase the lending. And the second was keeping borrowing affordable, which was also by keeping interest rates low, which was at a historical low. So this allowed citizens to continue to take out loans and borrow. And the third was supporting access to credit for firms and households. They really focused on small and medium businesses because they were the most impacted by the pandemic. And they did this in 3 ways: by easing standards for collateral, expanded the amount of qualifying assets, and decreasing strictness on how assets were continued. And they also did 4 other by ensuring the short-term concerns do not prevent lending, increasing banks' lending capacity, and preserving financial stability through international cooperation by reutilizing swap lines.
So as we see, the ECB was for sure able to, be able to put down a goal, complete that goal, and furthermore, even produce those programs that we just explained to really showcase that the organization is strong and have shown that even through the COVID-19 pandemic. The future of ECB and in general money is still, I think, being produced. As we look at Fabio Mantena, who said, look at how investors and governments will approach this new form of money and market, which he's referring to cryptocurrencies. The ECB has shown some interest, not necessarily in adopting cryptocurrencies, but more so creating cryptocurrencies of their own. And I think that that's something that they're going to start working towards in the future. We have here on the right a chart from CoinMarketCap of Tether, which is the leading stable coin within the cryptocurrency market, which means that this coin is pegged by the dollar. So every coin that is created in the cryptocurrency market, supposedly Tether has in their bank $1. And so they're trying to keep the price of this as stable as possible, which makes this new form of cryptocurrency somewhat reliable for the future, and is now, with the ECB, showing that they can possibly have some use cases once they're able to create that stable coin of their own. So moving forward, that is our conclusion of our ECB, but we will be discussing the Oanda training slides now. So some of the quick facts: we really enjoyed trading on Oanda. It was a new experience for all of us, something that we had to learn, but we thought it was interesting and for sure new to us. And so we traded a lot of pairs, but in general, some of the larger pairs that we traded were the ones you see on the screen. We traded a number of 12 times. And when we started looking at trading, it really varied on how we wanted to trade. Did we want to hold this trade for 3 days or longer? did we want to sell this afternoon? So that really influenced what was the chart timeframes that we were looking at. If we were going to buy and sell, buy low and sell high for the short term, we really wanted to look at the 15-minute or 30-minute chart. But if we're thinking about holding it a little bit longer, we wanted to know where the chart was already heading in terms of a trend, which we would then look at the day charts. So it was somewhat difficult to at first realize that I can't really trade off of just one chart. I have to trade off of multiple charts. But at the end of the day, it was successful because we were able to make, we were able to be in the money and be in profit because we were able to really just get a strategy down and continuously do that strategy over and over and over again. So our profit loss per trade in general was in dollars, $90, but in pips, it varied since we traded some currencies that had different forms of pips. And the indicators that we use mainly were the MACD indicator and the RSI indicator, which we will be, I'll be explaining in a bit. So moving on to our first trade that allowed us to get $232, which is a lot, was the AUD USD trade. So when we were looking at this, we first saw that there was a downtrend, but it seemed like it rebounded just a little bit. And if you look at the RSI here in the first trade, it was nearing close to being oversold, and it was continuously going up. And so then we looked at the MACD indicator, and it had crossed that zero baseline. So we bought some, and we saw that it was continuously going up. So we bought some more, and this was just showed how confident we were in this trade. And this trade is really interesting as well because this is when we were able to sell. We sold at a high of the RSI at almost hitting 80, and then we saw a sharp decline in the price. So which just means that like we sold it when people were overselling it. And we were able to get out before that big dip, but there was obviously a huge increase going back up after. But we were really happy with this trade. This next trade we held for 2 days, still was able to yield us $159. For this, we really were just kind of looking at the trends. It seemed like it was having this like ranging motion, so we didn't really know what was going to happen. So we put 10,000 units in, and we thought this would be a good idea. And as soon as we saw the first price spike, we sold right away. As you saw, there was a lot of overselling, so we didn't feel super confident in our ability to hold. But if we would have held, we obviously would have made a little bit more money. But again, we're happy that we were able to come out with a profit, and still the MACD and the RSI helped us out a bit, but they're not always telling. As you saw in our first trade, we bought when the RSI was at all-time highs, but at the same time, we were able to make some money. And then moving on to the GBD and AUD, this is something that we took a loss in. When we were looking at this, I think we made the mistake of looking at it too far in scope. So we were looking at it from the day, the daily kind of the day charts, and so we saw an uptrend chart moving forward, and we thought it would be a good idea to invest. But as soon as we saw the price decrease, although we could have made our money back if we were to sell at all-time high again, we just didn't feel confident in the stock, and we held it on for 2 days. So that was kind of like the average was about 2 days. We were able to put in the order and then sell whenever we needed to. Again, we saw the RSI kind of hit spikes almost to 90, and that's kind of when we started to sell, which just goes to show that just because the RSI or MACD shows that this is a sell or a buy trend, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the case. It's just there for us to help us understand where the trends currently are going. And finally, the Euro and NOK trade. We didn't make a lot of money off of this, but we were definitely able to sell or buy low and sell high. And I think the reason for this was we just didn't put enough units within, but we held this for a pretty long time, for 6 days. So we saw it ranging after it shot up. We saw it ranging, which we could have definitely bought even more and then sold when it got higher. But again, we weren't super confident on where it was going. The MACD and the RSI, as you can see, are just kind of going both ways. And I think this makes sense, especially for the Forex market, because the Forex market, there's a lot of liquidity and there is a lot of individuals trading essentially on speculation and on patterns. So it's not as reliable, the RSD and MACD, I would say, for this, but can be a little bit more reliable for other markets, such as the stock market. But this is an interesting trade, and we're happy to at least get a little bit of profit off of it. And finally, we were able to make a 1% return on our account, which I think is a huge benefit. As we finished the midterm, we started thinking like, hey, we haven't traded a lot, we should trade a lot more. And although we were running a little bit short on time, we were still able to produce a profit that, again, is a 1% increase in our total account. And for the S&P 500, the average return is about 7.5% a year. So we were able to do that in about a week for a 1%. So I think that's a really good sign that we were able to learn a lot more about the Forex market, and in general, just learn a lot more about using those indicators and just being confident with our trades. I think in the future, we probably would want to trade the same currency pairs over and over and over again, since we would be able to understand the charts just a lot better. But that's something that we were going to be working on for the future. And that is all. Thank you all for listening to our presentation. We really appreciate it. Thank you.